Welcome, everyone. I'm going to start the meeting, calling it to order. This is the meeting of the Health, Environment, and Community Engagement Committee. I'm the committee chair, Councilmember Cam Gordon, and today I'm joined by Councilmember Elizabeth Glidden, Vice Chair of the committee Andrew Johnson, Jacob Fry, and Lisa Bender. And also we're very lucky to be joined by students from Whittier School who are filling the chambers today. And it's delightful to see you all here. I hope you've got your whole afternoon free because we have a long meeting planned for you. There's 10 items on the agenda, but if anybody has to leave early, we do understand that too. We have Councilmember Cano joining us now. We're certainly a quorum of the committee. We have 5 consent items, and first I'm going to read through the consent items. If any committee member wants to pull something off to discuss that, we can do that, but I'll read through them, and then if we're not pulling anything off, we'll pass them all together. And then we have 4 discussion items. And on one of the discussion items, the Americans with Disabilities Act item, there will be some time for public comment if anybody's here to make a comment on that. So first, the consent agenda. The first item is passing a resolution accepting a gift of $10,000 from Excel Energy and $10,000 from Centerpoint Energy for the Clean Energy Partnership to implement a community engagement pilot project. Second item is approving appointments to the Community Environmental Advisory Commission. There are several appointments listed there. The third item is authorizing an agreement with PACE Analytics Services in the amount not to exceed $120,000 to provide environmental-led services for the city. And this will go from January 1, 2017 to December 31st, 2019. Fourth item is accepting a grant from the School-Based Health Alliance in the amount not to exceed $4,200 to continue participation in the School Health Service National Quality Initiative. And the last consent item is authorizing a contract with Volunteers for America in the amount not to exceed $241,500 to provide community health worker services in select Minneapolis Public Housing Authority high-rise buildings. And that will go from January 1, 2017 to September 29, 2018. And those last 3 items and the first item will also be referred to Ways and Means. Any committee members wish to pull those items for questions or discussion? Any of those items? Seeing none, then I will move all items for approval. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Now those motions carry. Then we're on to our discussion items. The first discussion item is about the Minneapolis green zones. It's item number 6. We're going to get an update from Kelly Mullen. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Chair, Council members. I'm Kelly Mullen with the City Coordinator's Office, Sustainability Office. I'm a Sustainability Program Coordinator. And I want to thank you today for having me here to give an update on the Green Zones Work Group. Just as a refresher, back in February, the City Council unanimously approved a resolution establishing the Green Zones Work Group. And the charge for the work group was to use data to develop recommendations for a Green Zones priority areas, criteria and eligibility requirements for designating those Green Zones areas, goals and metrics for each designation, and strategies aimed at improving health and supporting economic development. The work that we did to establish the Green Zones Work Group, we did a call for representatives starting in February of this year. You may remember we included advertisements in your council newsletters. We worked with NCR to reach out to neighborhood associations and other community-based organizations and connected with our own contacts, and then established the work group. The work group has been meeting since April. The work group includes 10 community representatives, including residents, business owners, and nonprofit affiliates, as well as a representative from the Public Health Advisory Committee and the Community Environmental Advisory Commission, as well as 9 agency staff, 7 from our own city departments, 1 from Metro Transit, and 1 from the Park Board. As I mentioned, we've been meeting since April. There's been 8 meetings in total. We spent the first couple of meetings grounding the work group in the topic area of green zones. We did 2 trainings for the work group members. And then in recent months, we've established, or I should say the work group has established 8 priority areas for the green zones. Equity, gentrification, affordable and sustainable housing, green jobs, brownfield and soil contamination, air quality, food access, and greening. We've identified data to measure each of these 8 priority areas, and I'll show that in a moment. And now we're in the process of moving into prioritization of the geographic areas and identifying the strategies and activities that would happen within the green zones. So the council requested that this be a very data-driven process, and we have taken that charge seriously. I want to show you briefly the data that we've pulled around the 8 priority issues. So this is our public website, and as you can see, we have loaded what's called the Green Zones Calculator. It's 32 different data points to measure the 8 priority areas, and you can turn layers on and off to see individually or collectively the impact.
I'll just note that this is actually available on the city website. If committee members want to look it up, it's linked from the staff report, but also people at home who want to look at it later, or people here maybe, this tool is available for others to explore and experiment with.
So this is just an example where I've turned on different indicators, one for each of the different 8 priority issues, and you can see how it changes the priority areas of the map. And just as a quick explanation, the dark orange areas are the areas of highest priority, and that go to the light orange and then light blue and then dark blue as areas that are doing a little better off related to the 8 priority issues. Now I'll just wrap up with our next steps and where we're going with this. So in December, we are planning to review existing place-based initiatives and programs that would be relevant to the 8 Green Zones priority issues. This will inform the prioritization of the green zone geographies as well as recommendations for activities and needed resources. Basically, we can't know what we should do until we know what we're already doing. In January, we'll pull all the pieces together, including the criteria for selecting the green zone areas, the priorities, goals and metrics and strategies, and pull that together and finalize it in February and prepare it for City Council review. Additionally, through December through February, we will also be vetting the work group's ideas with communities, likely the priority communities of North, South, the Phillips Powderhorn area, and Northeast that have been highlighted in the data that we've been looking at, just to make sure that the work group's recommendations are on track with community interests. One last thing I'd like to note is that the work group wanted me to share with you how difficult it has been to try and focus in on one priority green zone. It's a challenge and a charge that they are taking very seriously. And they are really using data to just drive the decision making and understanding the existing work to help identify the most strategic places to focus our limited resources. So while they felt crunched for time, they're doing their best to move forward quickly under pressure. Thank you. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Councilmember Bender has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Are there any employer representatives on the work group?
As in, I'm sorry, Chair, Councilmember, as in labor or business owners, or how would you define?
Yes, just since one of the goals is focused on employment. Yes. So anyone who employs people, but representatives from labor or any of the industries.
Yeah, so Chair, Councilmember, we do have 2 business owners on the work group. We don't have anyone from labor.
Maybe what I would be helpful to see is the full list of the sort of descriptors of the work group available? Is that on the website? I know we had gone, there was quite a lot of back and forth about which members should be on this group, and I don't remember where it landed.
It is in the resolution, which is linked on the website, but it's kind of hard to find it. But we did stipulate 8 different groups or representatives, I guess, stakeholder groups who would serve on the task force.
That's helpful. I will look for that.
I also had a question about the original resolution too, and that's why I happened to have it up, so I could act like I was so smart. I'm wondering, did we say that we wanted the group to come back with one recommendation for one pilot area to present to the council? Do you recall? It says council may designate, no.
So Chair, in the language that I'm looking at, it says, work with staff and area stakeholders on developing let's see. I thought I had seen that somewhere.
Partly when I'm looking at the information now and all the indicators that you're looking at, is there over 20 of them, or there's quite a few?
There are 32.
32, thank you.
Data points. Yeah.
So that's more than I was expecting, but it also shows the work group is really trying to look at all the different variety of variables. And I understand that they haven't even maybe identified what they think are the most important or weighty. There's 32 that you're working with now, and you can look at on the map. But looking at that, it does look like there might be a few different areas that would qualify to be designated somehow. And I've looked at it from different ways. So I was concerned with one of your comments that maybe we had given such policy that the work group was getting overwhelmed being able to designate one particular site. And so I was curious if we actually said that. In my mind, I'm sure we're open to some flexibility about it. At least I am, depending on what the results are that come back. So you can take that as a comment. And I see that there's several other questions, so I'll keep looking at the resolution to see if I can find that. Councilmember Fry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Two questions. So first, and I could be wrong here, but I believe that union or labor was supposed to be one of the members on this committee. Did someone reach out to them just to ensure that they had participation?
Thank you, Chair, Council Member. So we did reach out to, I believe, 2 different union representatives, and they were unable to participate.
Okay. And then what's the number of businesses that are presently on it? I know that there was one request for a business that had substantial knowledge in environmentally friendly and green activities that was supposed to partake. Is that the case, or were they also not able to participate?
Yeah, so Chair, Council Member, we do have 2 business owners on the work group, and one owns a small business and the other is the executive director or president of a large industry.
Okay, that's helpful. And then finally, and this is a more broad question, but I can see the committee running into difficulties on this topic, which is gentrification. Obviously, one of the goals of this project is to improve the neighborhoods that are designated as green zones, to make the air quality, to improve the air quality, to improve the greening, and to improve the environment in general. Now, when you do those things, when you improve the air quality, when you improve the greening, when you do all this stuff, it improves the neighborhood and the prices go up. How are they balancing that with gentrification?
Chair, Council Member, that is one of the strategy areas that we will be looking into. There's work that has been done across the country developing strategies for that, and some local community-based organizations that are looking into best practices that we hope to learn from.
Do you know what those are offhand or not? Okay.
I don't.
Okay. That's it. Thank you.
Councilmember Cano.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I concur with you in that it was my understanding we were looking at green zones designations throughout our city, not just one area, but multiple areas. And I see that in your presentation, you even use that language too, green zones, priority areas. So it is a plural approach. That was my understanding, but would be happy to look at the language previously that we approved and codified. Ms. Mullman, on the 32 data points, are those data points weighted in any manner, or are they prioritized so that certain data points are given more of an importance in the way that they shape the conversation, because I could see how 32 data points actually dilute the focus of the work and they become just a neutralizing force in the conversation instead of actually zeroing in, on some of the problems.
Chair, council member. So with the online data tool, if you turn on all 32, each data point has an equal weight. So the 8 data points within equity would overbalance the data points that under issues that maybe have fewer. However, the way that we have taken the data within the work group is to give each of the 8 priority issues equal weight. So if there are 8 data points under equity, that just has one value that is equal to the green jobs issue, even if it has fewer data points. So we're averaging those values. So each priority issue has the same weight across. And that's where we're starting from. However, we are working with the work group to potentially prioritize those. So 8 areas to move forward with is a lot, and we want to make sure that we're focusing in on the ones that are most important to the work group members. That may result in weighting in the work group proposing that we weight 1 or 2 or 3 of the priority issues higher than the others, but we haven't finalized that decision yet.
Okay. Thank you for that information. I'm very interested in how that pans out. You mentioned this issue of as you were talking, I heard something about limited resources, that the group was concerned about limited resources. Can you expand on that a little bit? What were they referring to?
Sure, Chair, council member. That was just in the sense of the city itself has limited resources, and as a general statement.
Okay. I would just encourage the community folks on the work group to, help us do a good job of looking at the problem and the issue, and not be afraid of the decisions that we have to take as a council when it comes to resources. I think the role of the work group is to really help us identify the gaps, identify the situations and the realities and the challenges that our community members are facing. And then we as council members have to decide what to do with the resources. So I just wanted to relay that to the work group so that they're not overburdening themselves with decisions that don't really fall on their purview, but that fall on a policymaker's table.
Thank you. I can appreciate that too. And it might be that it would be useful to hear about with existing resources, here's what we could offer, and here's where there might be some needs or something like that could be helpful. I did look at the resolution, and it sounds like we're asking the work group to gather the data and draft recommendations regarding green zone priority areas, designation criteria and eligibility, goals and metrics tracking, etc. But then later on, when it talks about the council actually designating it, it does say, upon acceptance of the work group's report and recommendations, council may designate a zone-specific task force, and then it goes on, talks about that. So I think the council could designate 2 zone-specific task forces I wanted. I know that was part of a big discussion that we had about what's the next step, and so we kind of teed it up here. I'll also note that one of the other resolve clauses was that we get all the final recommendations reported to us by the 4th quarter of 2016. So you can see we pass these resolutions, and sometimes we don't hit all the resolve clauses right on target. But I'm really glad you came back for this report. So in a way we did. We have a presentation of the recommendations so far, but you're expecting to come back again in March. Is that right? Of next year? With final
Chair, hopefully
recommendations?
by first quarter.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And I think we have a few more comments or questions. Councilmember Bender and Fry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wondered, I know this is further down in the next steps, but if you've made any progress on defining what a green zone means for Minneapolis, looking at all of the different indicators, this touches transportation and housing quality and inspections, certainly touches employment and potentially industrial related issues. So it's covering a lot of ground here, which I think is good. I think it's good to have this data mapped for a lot of different policy reasons, but has there been any progress on sort of focusing in on what is a green zone in Minneapolis? I know different communities have different definitions or different policy tools that they're using in this designation.
Chair, council member, the work group felt it was very important to include all 8 of the priority issues. When it came down to it, they were basically unwilling to give up any one because they're also critically important to a healthy and thriving community. And so I think the charge or the task at hand is really to focus in on which are the biggest priorities. If there is one pilot or multiple pilots within each of those communities, the focus might be a little bit different based on that specific community's need.
I think that makes sense. It's probably just worth noting that a lot of this also touches, a lot of ongoing work that multiple departments are doing across the city, citywide. So the lead inspections, for example, just comes to mind as one. So there may be ways that even if, so maybe there's a concentrated geographic focused effort in a green zone, but a lot of these issues are also obviously citywide needs for policy and investment.
Thank you. Councilmember Fry?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I don't mean to harp, but I'm really interested in this concept of gentrification, and I don't want to be simultaneously pushing back on the work that we're doing because we have goals that are at odds with one another. And by that, I mean we're investing significantly in an area, values will go up, thus creating some gentrification to a certain extent, unless we have adequate funding for affordable housing and a bunch of other areas. And I don't know whether should form this in a staff direction, but I would like to see the information compiled from other jurisdictions on how they've improved an area in the green zone context without experiencing displacement and gentrification. I mean, I'm assuming a lot of it focuses on affordable housing. I don't know if there's other strategies as well. So if we could, I'll just go ahead and make a staff direction. So the staff direction would be when you come back in March, if you could include these strategies to make improvements without experiencing gentrification and displacement. So I'll go ahead and make that motion for a staff direction.
Okay. So there's a motion before us. Did you get that, Committee Clerk? Thank you. Any questions or discussion on the staff direction? Councilmember Cano?
Yes, Councilmember Fry, if you could just please explain gentrification so the definition is clear.
Well, Councilmember, Mr. Chair, Councilmember Cano, you make a good point. The definition of what constitutes gentrification is sometimes vague and ambiguous and at least very broad. I am looking at it, although I understand fully that it encompasses much more than this, I am looking at it in terms of displacement due to increased value and prices.
Could we add a clarification on the definition? That's a displacement of low-income people, communities of color, immigrant communities, and indigenous people?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. I will add that, make an amendment to that staff direction.
Okay. I'm just a little bit curious, would this also relate to commercial space? Because often gentrification is referring to housing costs, but what we sometimes see when we improve these areas, and there's the potential in these, if this is in a commercial or industrial area, that actually some of the resources will come in and help keep the space affordable and make improvements for some of those businesses.
Yeah. Mr. Chair, yes, I believe this would apply to commercial space. I believe it would apply to industrial space in wards 1 and to a certain extent 3. We have quite a bit of industrial, and when that industrial is rezoned over to commercial and or residential, you do occasionally see some gentrification that takes place. So I think I'm not specifying here on what it pertains to, whether it's commercial or residential or industrial, but I would like to see some strategies that used in other cities and states to make the necessary investments in these communities that are struggling without then pushing the same communities out.
Okay, and I wasn't suggesting amending the staff direction. That was just a question that I had.
It's fair. Good question.
Appreciate that. Any other discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. That motion carries.
Councilor.
And I suppose given what we've been learning recently, we better ask the question about unintended consequences of pushing costs up and displacing people about almost all our decisions these days. Councilmember Connell.
Thank you. I just have one last point. I appreciate your motion, Councilmember Fry, and your thoughtful approach at this issue. In terms of gentrification, I just sent yourself and Chairman Gordon a link to a project that has been working on environmental justice issues through an anti-displacement, anti-gentrification approach. And when the work group talks about gentrification, I would encourage them to look at the ecosystem that creates gentrification. And so it's not just about housing prices going up, but it's also about worker incomes getting lower or remaining stagnant over time, as well as opportunities for jobs and for, in general, just improving people's lives. And so as we're improving the environment, the physical environment of where people live, we also have to improve the structural opportunities that these low-income community members and underserved communities experience, which are connected to institutional racism and to structural injustices. And so this website that I just circulated to our two council members having this discussion here is about, working with the communities that live in these areas to retain them in this space, to provide opportunities for them to anchor themselves in these communities, and to be the leaders of these conversations around economic development and green, environmentally friendly businesses. And so there's a way to the way to do this would be a two-pronged approach, which is obviously phasing out the industrial polluters in these areas and phasing out other kinds of pollution that is happening here, but then also investing in the people to ensure that they have the opportunities to get the jobs that will likely be opened up through an improvement in this area, as well as looking at things like raising the wage, which the city of Minneapolis is already doing, and creating an ecosystem that counters the gentrification forces. So it's a very dynamic set of strategies that would likely come out of a conversation like that. And I would encourage the work group to look at the issue of gentrification through that lens. I sent you the link as well.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Connell. Councilmember Bender.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this is a great discussion, and again, it may be manageable taking on all of these citywide issues if the scope is a geographically constrained area, but I did want to comment that I think that we're sort of getting into the work of the Minneapolis City Council here when we're talking about all of these sort of land use issues and housing cost issues, rental inspection issues, employment. So I just want to be cognizant of the fact that we're asking a group of volunteers to make policy recommendations around a specific tool called a green zone. We haven't really defined what that means for Minneapolis. I look forward to the recommendations coming out of the group, but just wanted to note that, this is sort of one aspect of all of these big citywide issues, and maybe we need to sort of also make sure that we're managing expectations about what staff in this group of volunteers can take on. Just throw that out there.
And I also just want to note, partly because I was reviewing the original resolution, that this group was charged with kind of coming up with how to make a designation, what's the criteria, what does it mean, a little bit of a bigger picture. But in the resolution, then we say once an area is designated, then there needs to be a lot of work that goes into that area. And I think some of these issues, including how do we counterbalance any possible displacement, or these things could be the work then of that green zone area task force or leadership steering committee that gets designated. So I appreciate that we might be piling more on there, but you have the staff direction before you. And seeing no other comments, then I just want to thank you for the presentation and move to receive and file this report. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair, council members.
Next, we have item number 7 on our agenda, and this is the 2017-2019 Americans with Disability Act Action Plan. And Mr. Rubador will tee this up for a report, and we also want to take some public comments. So I think we'll take the report first, and then we'll open it if anybody wants to make a few comments about it. Welcome.
Chair Gordon, committee members, good afternoon. I'm David Rubador, Director of the Neighborhood and Community Relations Department with the City of Minneapolis. I'm here today to present, or at least introduce the final Americans with Disabilities action plan for the council approval. The committee members may recall back in July, we had a chance to review a draft of this plan. Since that time, we received a considerable amount of public comment on it. We've been continuing to work with other city departments on the finalization of the plan, and we're here today to present the final plan. So the action before you on this item is to request the council to approve the 2017 through 19 ADA action plan with the comprised policies and strategies to comply with the Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act, with the idea that this plan would go into effect January 1st, 2017. As you may recall, this is a body of work that the city took on voluntarily. We have not been compelled by any particular outside interest other than our own to be able to ensure that all of our programs and services, as well as our decision-making processes, are really open for people with disabilities. So this is an act that we have taken on ourselves. And it really has been a significant body of work over the last 2 years. We have spent a 2-year period doing an evaluation in collaboration with Property Services and the Public Works Department, really looking at all aspects of the city's work in compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act. In addition to the departments that we've been working with to lead on this, we have this work has actually touched every department within the city enterprise. We've had a chance to meet with and be able to evaluate and review their work in order to ensure that we have the correct actions in place. I want to be clear about the action being requested of you today is that this is an adoption of the plan and the policy behind it, and really the intended outcomes and the corrective measures. In the plan itself, it does include estimated cost items. This is not a budgetary action that's being requested today. This is an adoption of the plan. The individual departments, when they're ready to move forward with the corrective actions that are included in the plan, will bring those budget requests individually to the city council through the regular budget process. I'm going to just do a quick overview of the ADA and how it relates to our work, and then I'm going to hand the presentation over to Nick Noe, who is the lead staff person who's going to go through the actual evaluation work on a high level, and then we're going to go through the plan components. Just as a reminder, the Neighborhood and Community Relations Department oversees 2 federal civil rights laws, or at least the city's compliance with 2 federal civil rights laws. One is language access. The City Council adopted a new language access plan in 2015, which significantly revised our services to the non-English speaking communities of our city. And this is the second part of that, which is the Americans with Disabilities Act, which was adopted in 1990. The city, the purpose of these 2 civil rights acts and the work that we do behind them really is intended to support the One Minneapolis goal by removing barriers to participation for all members of our community. As with the language access plan, the ADA plan that you see before you exceeds federal requirements and really is a robust plan about making sure that people with disabilities are able to participate in our civic process. And just a little bit more of a history on this thing, on the ADA. When the ADA was first adopted in 1990, the city completed a transition plan in 1993. The action before you today is really a revision and an update of that original transition plan from 1993. As you would probably surmise, the technology and communications capabilities have changed considerably, and the ADA has changed considerably since its original adoption. So the plan today really updates the city's work in those particular areas. So with that, I'd like to hand it over to Mr. Noe.
Thank you, Director Rubidor, Chair Gordon, council members. Thank you for having me here. Good afternoon. My name is Nick Noe, and I'm the ADA and Language Access Coordinator for the Neighborhood and Community Relations Department. Before I start, I just want to say thank you to our city departments and our advisory committee on people with disabilities for partnering with us on this endeavor. This has been a large body of work, and it takes a lot of buy-in and a lot of work to make sure that we not only meet compliance, but go beyond the ADA. So today, I'm just going to go over what the plan is and its outcomes and changes since we last presented to you in July. Really quick, what we have in front of you is sort of our ADA infrastructure for the city. The two technical pieces is with Property Services and Public Works, who oversees our physical infrastructure. Property Services with our city-owned and leased buildings, and Public Works managing our city-owned right-of-ways, streets, and maintenance of those policies. Traditionally, the ADA looks at the physical infrastructure, and these two departments have taken it upon themselves to also do an evaluation of the physical inventory that we have under the city. Just as Director Rubidor has mentioned, NCR manages the Title II compliance piece of the ADA, making sure that we have an identified ADA Title II coordinator, which is Director Rubidor, as well as grievance procedures and ways to modify and enhance our programs and policies if we find them inaccessible to people with disabilities as well as our other residents. This last year, we started an evaluation in the summer to review our programs and services. And what we have before you is a overall plan with executive summaries from Property Services and Public Works. During our evaluation process, we had two public perception survey going out to city staff as well as the public to identify if they know what our ADA infrastructure is, as well as the compliance pieces and what they need in terms of enhancements and knowledge around what the ADA is and what the issues are. So a lot of that comment and the work from both from city staff as well as our advisory committee and the public has helped shape us into determining what our plan is for that we have ahead of you. In July, we brought the plan or draft plan to this committee to be released for public comment. Since then, it has changed significantly with more detailed, strategies to making sure that we remove barriers to participation. And during this time, we worked with the Advisory Committee on People with Disabilities. We went to the Committee on Aging, as well as we've had comments from other residents throughout the city as well. So what we have is a comprehensive policy document. That's what the ADA action plan is. It's meant to be dynamic and ever-growing. Knowing that the ADA is currently evolving, we want to make sure that our plan is also have the capacity to do so as well. One of the changes we made is making sure that we do an annual review, which we would report back to this committee. If there are any significant changes that need to be made, we would propose an amendment to that plan. And I think we plan to do that third and fourth quarter. And that also means that we will present any updates that Public Works and Property Services present as well. As the Director Rubidor mentioned, we want to make sure that the doctrine of this plan is really around the strategies and the outcomes and not around the cost estimates. Those are purely informative, and it's just meant to make sure that we know what are the necessary resources to achieve those outcomes. If we find that that those shifts or any strategies needs to be made differently, we will present that at the end of the next year as well. So a broad overview of the plan. A lot of what we found in our evaluation is that we need to consistently review our policies and procedures. And what we've built into this plan is that even though we have great work that's being done right now to make sure that our policies and programs and services are accessible to everyone, we just need to make sure that we consistently review that with not only our advisory committee on people with disabilities, but with the public as well. So plans such as our emergency operations plan, our fire evacuation plan, which is really around safety, we just want to make sure that we continually revisit that to make sure that it considers everyone across all mobilities as well. The large changes and enhancements that we have in front of you is with communications, IT, as well as NCR. The last time we came back, the last time that we were at this committee, we said that we were going to implement a captioning as part of our city informational videos as well as council meetings. What we have in this iteration of the plan is a more finite plan in how to roll that out. We want to start with informational videos, then moving into capturing full city councils and then the council standing committees as well. We identified that we want to utilize vendor services and hire part-time staff to manage that contract as well as gather other informational videos from other departments. One of the primary reasons that we wanted to start with informational videos is understanding that a lot of our city services and the information of how to access and utilize those programs and services are within our videos. Secondly, with our IT, our proposed enhancements around that is changing and updating our website management system. We recognize that our system right now is somewhat outdated, as well as has some digital barriers to people that use assistive devices and technology. What we identified in this iteration of the plan is that we will move forward with implementing a new system. IT will be spearheading that charge and figuring out how to secure the funding as well as implement that charge, and then as well as developing an accessible technology policy, working with the web content user guides across departments to make sure that they know what the accessibility components are, as well as developing guidelines and procedures, making sure that the information and what we post online is accessible to everyone.
So I just wanted to interrupt.
Sure.
So if we look in the plan now, you have the amended costs for the communications components and the IT components in there, and the money and the zero for 2017 for communications and $400,000 in 2017 for IT are part of the proposed budget.
Correct.
Okay.
And those departments will move those pieces forward as when they're ready to implement them as well.
Thank you. And I'll just note for my colleagues that communications department staff did brief me on the changes they made. They wanted to be here today, but most of them are at a required, or I don't know if it's required, but a emergency management conference out of town today.
And to continue the presentation, one of the other changes that we made to this revision is that NCR will undertake we will undertake a training or providing resources to city staff around disability awareness as well as specialty topics to make sure that they have the best resources possible to deliver their programs and services. We understand that topics such as accessible PDFs, what the web content and accessibility guidelines are, as well as accessible events are very highly critical areas with not only our Committee on People with Disabilities, but with the general public as well. So we want to make sure that we provide quarterly trainings for as much city staff as possible. Secondly, develop and work more closely with the Advisory Committee on People with Disabilities. We found that when we create a strong partnership with our appointed boards and commissions and our departments, the outcome is a very effective and better product. So an example of that is the taxi cab ordinance that we passed a few years ago as well. So we want to make sure that we bring as many departments and programs and divisions back to our advisory committee so that way we can work with making sure that the policies and what they have are accessible to everyone. And then lastly, working with our property services division to make sure that when there's any alteration or change in the physical location of programs and services, that we work with each other to make sure that that space is accessible to everyone. And then working to create a technical assistance program for our neighborhoods organization as well, recognizing that NCR provides the funding as well as they have to oversee Title II and Title III regulations of the ADA and making sure that they have the resources and knowledge and capacity to make their programs and services accessible to the residents that they serve. Really quick, I just want to provide an overview of the physical infrastructure that property services and public works will be undertaking. Last year, Property Services 2 did an evaluation of our own and leased buildings. They assessed over 76 locations where we deliver our programs and services. What they found are deficiencies or areas to improve around accessible path of travels, routes, counters, door handles, restrooms, and just countertops, and just the overall physical location. What they have is known as an ADA transition plan, which is more the traditional aspect of what an ADA plan is for local government agencies. And they will be embarking on their own timeline to make sure that they physically modify and fix barriers to participation over the next few years as well. For Public Works in 2012, they conducted an evaluation of our right-of-ways and streets. They assessed over 15,000 right-of-ways and pedestrian ramps, I believe. And what they developed from that was a transition plan that they have been operating off of since 2013. And what they're going to be embarking on for 2017 is updating that plan to include city streets and sidewalks, as well as developing priorities, policies, and approaches to sidewalk gaps and maintenance and snow removal, and making sure that they update their plan to meet a lot of the current standards and procedures right now. Chair Gordon, council members, that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll see if there's any comments or questions, and then we'll take public comment. Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know I've mentioned it before to the department as well, specifically around captioning and the advancement of technology in this space and how that might disrupt plans around hiring or vendor selection or such. And as it turns out, since I last mentioned this, on October 17th, history was made. For the first time, there have been reports now, this is from Microsoft, NVIDIA, that human parity has been reached with the ability of technology to recognize speech and translate it as effective as humans do. So first time in history. And this is obviously a huge advancement. And I know over the coming years, it's going to be integrated ultimately into the different technology areas and systems. And so I could certainly see programs like, or web apps like YouTube, for instance, integrating this type of technology where it can automatically translate as well as a human, automatically caption as well as a human. So I really hope that we're keeping our eyes on that with this plan and with these milestones set out here so that we know where the technology is going to be before we start spending money on vendors and programs and hiring folks, when by the time we get through all of that and it's implemented, very likely the technology will already be there and built in to the products and services we're already using, so that we can ultimately have as good of captioning as technologically possible out there. And so that's just my strong encouragement. I know I've given it before, but I want to keep repeating it because I think it's really important stuff. We know that, especially these days, technology is advancing so quickly, and it's important for us to have our eyes wide open on that and see where we're headed and where things are coming up. Realistically, of course, when that happens, we're not going to have flying cars next year. I understand that, but you know, we need to be looking at these and factoring these things into our policy decisions. So I look forward to continuing that conversation with you as that technology rolls out.
I appreciate that. I just hope that we look carefully at who's judging the technology and make sure that we aren't taking the vendor's word for it, but we're listening to and communicating with people who actually need to use and want to use and rely on the captioning and that technology going forward. But appreciate that. I don't see any other comments or questions right now. So then why don't we open it for public comments? Is there just, who all wanted to come and speak? Okay, in that case, we'll give you an unlimited amount of time. Feel free to take the next 90 minutes. No, just kidding.
I'll try to take it all. Thank you very much. Chair Gordon, council members, my name is David Fenley. I live in the Kingfield neighborhood of Ward 8. I am also the vice chair of the Minneapolis Advisory Commission, Committee on People with Disabilities. Ken Rogers regrets not being able to make it today, but I'm here to express our gratitude to NCR staff and to council members for working with us to create a very robust ADA action plan. We are pleased with it. Of course, we would like to see timelines shortened, but we're fundamentalists when it comes to this type of thing, and we know that there are limited resources, and it's being spent, you know, across the board to make our city more equitable for all of its residents, more inclusive for all of its residents, and this is a major part of that. 2 quick points, actually 3 quick points. First, Councilmember Johnson, we may not have flying cars next year, but we very might have self-driving cars next year. So that's a major technology jump for people with disabilities. 2 more serious notes. The Americans with Disabilities Act is really the baseline. It really is the starting point from which we then move forward and create a more inclusive city. So we just want to make sure that that meeting the Americans with Disabilities Act is not, oh yeah, we're going to be compliant with the Americans with Disabilities Act. That's a given. If you're not, you're breaking the law. I The second point would be on the terms of equity, diversity, and inclusion. I always like to say that disability does not discriminate. Disability cuts across all demographic groups, it cuts across all socioeconomic statuses, and anybody at any time can become a member of people with disabilities. A good example of this is it's timely that the green zones was up before me, but that disability can fall more heavily on historically disenfranchised communities, and that's it's statistic proof in both asthma and diabetes rates among children who live in zones that are environmentally injustice to their group. So, in closing, I just wanted to thank all of you and as well NCR again for working with us to make sure that our city is more inclusive and equitable to all of its residents. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you being here, taking your time to come and make those comments. Now, I'm going to move approval of the 2017-2019 ADA Action Plan and see if there's any final discussion or questions on that. Seeing none, then all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. That motion carries. Congratulations. Now we'll move on to our next item, which is the 2015 Neighborhood Programs Annual Report. That's item number 8. And Robert Thompson, I believe, Stacy Sorensen and Michelle Chavez will be presenting. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair Gordon and committee members. My name is Michelle Chavez, and I am a neighborhood support specialist with the Neighborhood and Community Relations Department at the City of Minneapolis. And I'm joined by my colleague, Stacy Sorensen.
Hi, I'm Stacy Sorensen. I'm also a neighborhood specialist with the Neighborhood and Community Relations Department. And we're here to present the 2015 Neighborhood Programs Annual Report, and this is a receive and file item. And I'll let Michelle start.
So first off, I'd just like to start off with our summary findings. You all should have a hard copy of this report in front of you today as well. Our summary findings for 2015, 70 organizations, all neighborhoods reported in 2015 on their annual participation for the Community Participation Program. Approximately $6.8 million were expended through the Community Participation Program and the Neighborhood Revitalization Program contracts. Some trends that we've noticed through this report, trends throughout the neighborhood system, a lot more renter outreach and engagement across the city, a lot more collaboration between nonprofit agencies, advocacy groups, and other neighborhoods, partnership with external agencies to reach underrepresented groups, so partnerships with agencies such as Little Earth, Wait House, Juxtaposition Arts, Homeline, Mercado Central, and many more. We're seeing more and more neighborhoods partnering with each other. That is a trend that's continuing. So we have the Southside United Neighborhoods Group. We also have the Northside Neighborhood Council. There's a Northeast Tool Lending Library, for example. And also we have the Southwest Neighborhood Fix-It Fund, which is a group of several neighborhoods in Southwest collaborating together on that. We see increased collaboration with neighborhood community relations and regulatory services around housing issues. We see continual emphasis from our neighborhood groups on emphasis on self-improvement, both in how they run and also on their engagement outcomes. See an interest increased in environmental related projects, housing related issues, gentrification, healthy food, and healthy living. So we see all of our neighborhood groups are working on strategic planning, neighborhood priority setting, collaboration, and training for new board members. And another trend that we're also seeing is that many neighborhoods are hiring bilingual staff members to do outreach. So how does this neighborhood work get done? We asked neighborhoods a variety of questions through the annual reporting process. And one of those questions was, what do you do to reach underrepresented groups? And neighborhoods, they have a wide variety of strategies. A majority of neighborhoods did express that they do outreach to renters and that they meet specifically with different groups to address issues related to what's important to these underrepresented groups. One of the things that we've seen is outreach to the Latino community and the rental community, which is through neighborhoods like Lindale and Corcoran. Also, we've seen Northeast neighborhoods and Northside neighborhoods getting together to have renter forums where they have actually renters' rights events where people can come and hear and talk to professionals regarding their issues that they have across their communities. We see neighborhoods hiring, again, bilingual organizers. Several neighborhoods have Latina and Somali leadership programs where residents are able to learn how to be part of the neighborhood group and also learn how to run for their neighborhood boards. The next slide is a really basic overview of how neighborhoods accomplished projects and programs throughout the year of 2015. It also shows where the majority of the funds were expended. Approximately $4 million were expended on the community participation program as well as through setting neighborhood priorities through that program. Close to $3 million were spent on across other different strategies. As you can see, a large investment in housing programs, $1.6 million, as well as several different program areas and project areas, most popular being environment, community arts, crime prevention, parks, economic development, and transit. One of the things that is not in the slide but is in your report is on page 3. It talks about the different numbers and types of loan programs that were lent through the housing programs. And we also highlight the fact that the housing programs generated approximately $2.8 million in program income for the neighborhood groups.
Could you just talk a little bit more about what the neighborhood programs, the 3.9 million, what does that include?
Chair Gordon, committee members, that is the community participation program dollars, as well as setting dollars aside from that fund for neighborhood priorities. So that would be outreach and community engagement. It would be staffing, setting aside neighborhood money for projects. It would be their engagement activities they do on an annual basis and ongoing.
Okay, it might be interesting sometime to see. So part of that, it sounds like, goes to basic infrastructure and base level of capacity for the organization, rent maybe, or staff, and maybe some of that goes to projects where there's a little seed money, a couple $1,000s to make a mural. I'm not sure what the projects are. I made that up. But it might be interesting to know that a little more about that amount, how much is needed and being spent for that basic infrastructure, because some of that's community innovation program funding. Is that what we call it?
This is Chair Gordon. This is particularly community participation program
So
dollars.
this is the CPP only.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost all administrative.
Operations and funding, but they're allowed to set aside some of those dollars for neighborhood priorities, which are
Okay.
again more the project-based work.
Okay, so there's a little bit of there, and I don't expect you to have that now, but I do see another. Did you have a question, Councilmember? Good.
Well, I'm just trying to understand this. So you've actually helped me a little bit because understanding the source, as I understand it, the source is primarily there to support the infrastructure of the neighborhood, right? Which is the neighborhood. I'm assuming that's what the line item that says neighborhood programs means. And so that means that it's being spent in the way that we thought was being right-sized to meet the neighborhood association needs to kind of have an infrastructure in place that can do the work. And that housing programs I was interested in, I guess my mind was thinking more towards the NRP programs where there were requirements on how you spend your money, but you're saying this is part of the more flexible money where they could have chosen a bunch of other stuff. But clearly, if there was extra money, the majority of the spend was put towards housing programs. I guess that's what this is telling us. Is that it?
Chair Gordon, Councilmember Glidden, you are correct in that with the NRP dollars, the majority of those dollars did go into the housing programs. The first bar on this graph, that is particularly designated the community participation program dollars, and the rest of the bars are related to the neighborhood revitalization program dollars.
Oh, so
Yes.
This is part of the required spend
It's
then?
both, yes.
Okay, so that's what's maybe a little bit confusing, is that we have requirements around some funding sources, which are very old funding sources, and then we have different flexibility around kind of our newer ongoing sources with some identified purpose. Okay, thanks.
Councilmember Johnson also has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it's really helpful to have this aggregate view of the different categories of where the money is ultimately being spent. I think it would be helpful to have even further depth, especially under the neighborhood programs, if we have some kind of high-level consistent categories or subcategories within that we could filter out, and to also be able to tie these different spending areas to outcomes kind of on a broad sense. You know, when we talk about how much money goes into engagement or outreach, how much can we quantify how much outreach is happening and try to get some more standards around reporting back? Because ultimately, I really like this annual report. By the way, ultimately, our neighborhood associations are doing a lot of great work out there. And I think that this helps share that story. And the more that we can show kind of the aggregate categories of where that money is being put to use in the community and then the results of it, I think all the better to share the success and the outcomes that are happening. So I just wanted to thank you first and foremost for including this aggregate information, and hopefully encourage you to see more of it in future reports and further develop that out. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, continue.
Thank you, Chair Gordon. Getting to what Councilmember Johnson just said, there's lots of different ways that this work gets done, and we try to create a vast array of ways of gathering this data for the city of Minneapolis. We want to make it so that we can find out exactly how that outreach is being done. So some of it is done through, holding regular meetings. We assess how door knocking is done. As you've seen in your report, the physical report has a lot of narrative. So we want to balance the data, the numbers with the narrative that also tells the larger story. Neighborhoods are trending to have, they have their regular meetings that they meet monthly and annually, but they're also trending towards having non-traditional meetings in areas that maybe they haven't had meetings before. One example is people are having meetings in apartment buildings. They're having meetings that are centered around coffee shops. They're meeting people where they're at rather than waiting for people to understand how to come to a traditional meeting. The third bar talks about how many neighborhoods had meetings in response to a city request. As you see, a majority of neighborhoods do hold meetings at a request of the city that goes beyond just their traditional meetings. And one of the things we want to point out is that not just the city requests meetings, but there are many different agencies that are requesting and utilizing our neighborhood systems. So neighborhoods are often called on by the county, the park board, the school district, Metro Transit, the University of Minnesota, the state of Minnesota, MnDOT, business owners and developers, and the list goes on in terms of the amount of requests that are given to neighborhood groups for them to help with community engagement and actually reaching out to our residents. So many of these agencies they're not actually directly funding these efforts, so they're benefiting from the city's investment in this system and allowing the neighborhoods to help them with their outreach. I'm going to turn it over now to my colleague Stacy Sorensen for the next few slides.
Thanks, Michelle. So community outreach is really a core of what the neighborhoods do, and door knocking is a big part of that. In 2015, neighborhood associations reached over 40,000 households in person. So that's, the households in person and above and beyond those that they're reaching through newsletters and so on. This work was accomplished mostly through volunteers. You can see from our slide, sorry about that, that about half of the work was done by neighborhood volunteers or in conjunction with volunteers and staff. We've often thought it'd be interesting to track on a monetary level the contributions of neighborhood volunteers, and actually the Standish-Erickson neighborhood did that with 2 retiring newsletter volunteers. These 2 volunteers had worked for a number of years, and they calculated their time in figuring that they'd contributed the equivalent of about $175,000 to the neighborhood. So 2 volunteers, 1 neighborhood, multiply that by 70, not chump change there. Neighborhoods also do their work through community events and tabling. Just about every neighborhood organization hosted a booth or a table at a community event. and a slightly smaller number hosted at issue-specific events such as open streets. A slightly smaller number hosted a smaller event that was aimed at a targeted audience. The picture we have up here is of a Lynn Bohannon staff and volunteer, and here they're at their ice cream social. But a few months later, they were also at Juneteenth doing outreach to the African American community. We thought it was important to also highlight the work that we do in terms of providing oversight training and support to neighborhood organizations. We provide audits and financial reviews on a rotating basis. We try to have an auditor visit a neighborhood organization at least once every 3 years, and if there's a need, we're there more often. We provide board trainings, learning labs. We help with strategic planning. I should note that these are all undercounts. Like all of you, we talk with neighborhood residents and volunteers on a daily basis, and we find them putting their hearts and souls into this work, and we try to honor that work and do our best to match it. So one of my favorite parts of the annual reports is looking through the highlights that the neighborhoods provide. And this one example is from the Shingle Creek Neighborhood Association. Shingle Creek donated an accessible bicycle to residents at the Camden Care Center, and they were able to use that bicycle in the Tour de Camden bike ride. So, another highlight that we saw in multiple neighborhood reports, and is especially appropriate today, is the work that's being done on renter rights. And as I read this morning's Star Tribune article, I was like, oh, this is perfect. Because Lyndale, of course, has done a lot of work, but Lyndale's not alone. And just kind of reaching out to renters, making sure that renters have a voice, and that it's both the community organizers and leadership programs that are providing opportunities for residents in the neighborhood. Finally, this is at the centerfold of your report, and it shows the highlights presented, a portion of the highlights presented by every single neighborhood association. And to me, at least, I think it shows the range of work and the diversity of work that's being done by our neighborhoods. And I think as a result, the city is a lot richer for it. This concludes our presentation. We would be happy to stand for any questions.
I just have one question. How is this information in this report communicated back to the neighborhood organizations?
Sure. First of all the neighborhood reports are online on our website. We will be sending, and we will be also presenting this report to the neighborhood associations. Figured they give us information. It's important for us to provide feedback.
Excellent. It would be interesting to see what kind of feedback they give about how it might be changed or improved. I know I found it very accessible, and there were some nice metrics, and I appreciated that in there. I know we commented a little bit about the money and looking up about that in the future. It did also occur to me that it might be helpful to understand what the revenue sources, if that makes any sense. So we kind of looked at the total money and the expense areas or whatever, and so that might help clarify it for us up here anyway. I don't see any other questions or comments. So thank you very much for the presentation, and I will move to receive and file the report. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I know we've covered a lot. We still have 3 more things to get done. We're going to move right on to item number 9, and this is going to be, there's 2 different sections. So the first, we're going to look at appointed boards and commissions diversity survey, but item 9 is about the diversity surveys that have been concluded. And we're going to hear from Ms. Cheyenne Bodine. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Chair Gordon, committee members. My name is Cheyenne Bodine. I am the interim community engagement manager with the Neighborhood and Community Relations Department. And I am before you today to present the findings of the 2016 Appointed Boards and Commissions Diversity Survey. And this is a receive and file item. The city benefits from over 300 volunteers on our boards and commissions, and the Neighborhood and Community Relations Department, the City Clerk's Office, the City Council, and other city departments have been working together since 2009 to increase the diversity on our boards and commissions. Given the city's goal of One Minneapolis, it's imperative that those volunteers serving on our boards reflect the city's demographic. some of the key findings of the report, diversity in terms of race and ethnicity has increased by 13%. This is the largest increase of this diversity measure since we've been administering this survey. Volunteers serving on our boards and commissions living with a disability mirror the city's demographic by 100%. And we meet 4 of the 7 diversity measures that this report tracks. That's age, income, diversity, and gender. And the applicant pool more closely mirrors the city's demographics than it has in previous years. And however, there is still work to be done on the race, ethnicity, educational attainment, and own versus rent diversity measures. For the 2016 survey, we set a response rate goal of 60%, which we met, 61%. It's lower than in 2014, but still much higher than previous years of 2009 and 2012. As I mentioned, we include 18 of the city's general advisory boards and commissions in the survey. They're listed here on the slide, and they're also included in the report. I won't read them all.
Could you just tell us a little bit why these 18 were selected? We often hear we have up to, I forget if it's 45 or 50.
Sure.
Advisory boards and commissions. Yeah.
These boards were chosen primarily because of the direct appointments that are made by the mayor and city council. There are other boards such as special service districts, like the audit committee, and a few others that don't necessarily have direct appointments from the mayor and city council. And like special service districts, you'd have to live in a certain geographic area. So we just thought that limiting it to ones that the council and mayor have more control over will allow us to better gauge how we're doing.
Thank you.
And so for the diversity measures that this report tracks, we track age, people with disabilities, education, gender, income, people of color, and own/rent, and sexual identity. I will note that for sexual identity, we don't include it in our dashboard because there is no city benchmark to compare it to. However, it is tracked in the report. For the methodology of the survey, we conduct the survey online and it's voluntary. So any propensity for one demographic to respond to the survey over another isn't tracked in this report, and we don't compare that in the findings. Also, the validity of the survey is based on the response rate, which I said was 61%. For this year, we have, like I said, we have been doing the survey since 2009. However, for 2009 and 2012 surveys, those surveys were sent to a broader scope of respondents over the 18 boards and commissions, so we aren't including them in this report, just the 2014 survey. And I would also like to note that this year, for the 2016 survey, we asked all of the same questions that we had in the previous years, but expanded some of the questions to allow respondents to further identify. An example would be if you identified as African American, you could further identify as being East African or Nigerian, or just allowing people to further identify. And we actually found that this gives us some really good data to use in the future. The demographics of the applicant pool respondents, the city clerk's office has been collecting this data since 2013. Applicants provide a voluntary demographic questionnaire to the clerk's office when they apply. So for this survey, we're using data from years 2015 and 2016, which is 4 application cycles. And the margin of error for all of the questions in the survey is relatively low at about 5.5% to 6% with a 99% confidence level. For the benchmark comparisons that I'll be showing you shortly in the diversity measure dashboard, we divide the survey results by the 2014 American Community Service survey data, and that gives us the benchmark number. So if you had a benchmark of 100%, you would be mirroring the city's demographic. And we also include the Shannon Diversity Index on a number of these diversity measures, and those are diversity measures that have multiple barriers such as age, income, and education. And the Shannon Diversity Index is a formula that takes into account and weights different variables that have multiple options. I wanted to touch briefly on the outreach process. One that we do for outreach on boards and commissions in general in the spring and fall cycle. The Neighborhood and Community Relations Department works with the clerk's office and communications department and other city departments to do a broad outreach on the openings of boards and commissions. Board staff do a lot more outreach individually on their specific boards, but I just wanted to touch on that because it is a lot of work, and we do take it very seriously, all of the outreach to ensure that we're getting diverse applicants. And in terms of outreach for the survey, we worked with the city clerk's office and board staff to pass the survey along to board members. So NCR actually went to a number of board meetings just to share about the survey and offer that people could take it there on paper as well. And I just wanted to point out that board staff really helped a lot in making sure that we met our goal response rate of 60%. They did a lot of work. The diversity measure dashboard is what we use to provide a quick snapshot of how we're doing on our boards and commissions. So those diversity measures that land in the green are within 80% of the city's benchmark. And that we've decided is our target, that is our goal to reach for all of these measures. If the benchmark, or I'm sorry, the diversity measure is in yellow, that's between 40 and 75% of the city benchmark, and we've deemed that that would need attention. And if it's below 39% or 39% or below, that it would be in the red category, and that we've deemed it needs improvement. And here's the diversity measure dashboard for the 2016 survey. As I pointed out, we meet 4 of the 7 diversity measures: age, disability, gender, and income. Education and people of color are in the need attention category, and the own/rent is in the needs improvement category.
So I have a question about this, particularly about the disability category.
Sure.
I was curious, we have an advisory committee with people with disabilities. They were one of the 18, and so they were counted in this.
Correct.
If those individuals, if we took that out of the mix, that all those committee members, would we still be anywhere near as close to 100%?
That's a great question, Chair Gordon. I would have to go back and look at that data. I did not pull that out or prepare that for today.
I think it could be giving us a false impression if we look at this in terms of that. I mean, it's super that those people are participating on that committee.
Sure.
But it doesn't mean that on all our committees that constituency is well represented necessarily. I think it's 11% citywide. So
correct.
One of the 18 committees could be the 11. That's what I was imagining. That's probably our 11% right there. And I wonder we're at 100%. It looks great. It's fantastic on this chart, but I'm just saying,
Sure. Chair Gordon, I will note that if you look at our applicants, so who's applying, we're at 9%. So that I can check into that, but that's
okay. The general applicants. Okay.
Yeah, correct.
They could be applying for that committee though.
Correct.
Okay.
I wanted to just touch on the benchmark of people of color, the city or the diversity measure. As I stated, we've increased this number by 13% from the previous survey. And another interesting thing to note is that our applicant pool directly mirrors who's sitting on our boards and commissions. So our applicant pool is 29% people of color, and that is who our people seated on our boards and commissions is 24% people of color.
So the box is
I'm sorry,
and this is,
29.
I think this is fantastic progress and fantastic news. I remember last time we had a report, we heard about how we were getting more applicants, but we still weren't seeing the difference. So this 13% is helpful. This is an interesting way to look at it too. Kind of what we're saying is our benchmark that we think would be reflective of the city is the black boxes. And then the colored bars are what we actually have serving on our boards and commissions, just to clarify what that means. Thanks.
And this is just a comparison of a breakdown of our race and of the race and ethnicity of people serving on our boards and commissions. I will note that if you look at this, the bar that is 12% is that of 2 or more races. If you look at the American Indian and the Hispanic and Latino origin categories, we found that when we gave the option for people to further identify, those that identified as Hispanic and Latino origin and Native American further identified as another race. So they're lumped into the 2 or more race category. And moving on, this is, we wanted to also just share information about the own/rent diversity measure. This is our only red diversity measure that needs improvement. And one thing I wanted to point out that's a positive note for this measure is that our applicant pool shows that 41% of people applying to our boards and commissions are renters. So looking to the future, we have a good opportunity to increase that benchmark. And I will note that I think a lot for the work that we're doing on outreach, there's a lot of outreach to renters happening in the department and neighborhoods and across the city. So I think there's a lot of positive improvement we'll see with this benchmark moving forward. And as I previously stated, sexual identity isn't tracked in our benchmark, or our dashboard, but we do track it in the report. So 85% of our seated board members identified as being straight or heterosexual, 14% identified as being as gay, lesbian, bisexual, queer, and 1% identified as asexual. Some additional findings of the survey relate to orientation that is provided to seated board and commission members. 69% of survey respondents indicated that they received orientation after being seated on boards and commissions. From those 69% of respondents, 26% indicated that they received training from the city clerk's office, and 88% indicated that they received training from the staff person or department who staffs their board or commission. And I will note that those people could receive training from both the city clerk's office and the city department. One more additional finding is related to concurrent appointments. This measure has stayed relatively the same as the previous survey. This is something that we want to keep our eye on and watch. The less concurrent appointments will give us more opportunity for more people to sit on our boards and commissions. Some of the recommendations we're proposing as the outcomes of the survey. We want to develop specific outreach plans for renters, youth, and lower income residents in Minneapolis. We'd also like to focus our attention on recruiting more applicants of racial diversity and a broader range of educational attainment. We also like to leverage and better coordinate existing city programs, such as the One Minneapolis Fund, Community Innovation Fund, and City Academy, to focus those more on leadership development. We'd also like to incorporate a track for the 2017 Community Connections Conference on specifically boards and commissions. And we would like to develop ongoing training for staff that staffs boards and commissions on cultural competency and unconscious bias. we'd like to review the spring and fall cycle with the city clerk's office to make sure that it's working for us and meeting our needs. And we would like to work with the city council to appoint more renters. As I previously stated, we have an applicant pool of 41% of individuals applying. So I think that's something that, like I said, we can move that benchmark higher.
Councilmember Glidden has a comment or question.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks for the thorough presentation. It was very good information. And it's good to kind of see how many years have we received this report now?
Since 2009, this is the fourth survey report.
Okay, so it's really, I think, also great to kind of get the trajectory and how the information is changing and how you're getting a little bit more sophisticated and what to do with it. I love that you have adopted into the report some recommendations that are part of the next steps. And I think it also just shows that the work is bearing fruit. Just a couple of comments that I wanted to share. One is that I appreciate there's a recommendation in here that talks about connecting with the city staff that support the boards and commissions. I don't want us to kind of underestimate how important those staff members are in how we need to support that infrastructure in terms of what are kind of the major messages that they're then able to share with their chairs and their members that they support in terms of how the appointments process feeds into the importance of the work of those boards and commissions. So I just wanted to kind of reemphasize that. I don't know what kind of training and support that you're giving to them around this report, but encouraging them even with some additional tools of how they might continue to repeat the messages that relate even to their particular board or commission, how they keep that information about the commission in front of the chair or others who are, again, supporting that appointments process, I think is helpful. The other thing I just wanted to put out there is I don't know if at some point you might do some evaluation of, this is more like a point of curiosity on my part, but what boards and commissions, what styles of appointments seem to, over a period of time, reflect boards that kind of are gaining in diversity and kind of more reflective of the community as a whole, and which boards and commissions where that seems to be more challenging. I don't know if there's different types of kind of what they're being used to do where that seems to be more challenging. I'll just tell you on a kind of a personal level, I personally find these boards and commissions where there's a specific ward appointment, I really actually dislike it. It's not because I don't find it important to identify a connected person from the 8th Ward to be part of that work, but I will tell you we get almost no feedback on kind of the broader context of the board or commission, and no push either from staff, because of course it's really challenging for a staff member to challenge a council member. Why don't you do a little more outreach because you didn't get a very good range of applicants, or whatever it is, to kind of give us that feedback on how are we thinking of how to build that board or commission as a whole and have it work together as a whole, including these goals around diversity and what they look like when we just get that feedback on that one appointment. So I don't know if that's just my personal experience, and maybe in the end it all kind of works out, and that's just getting too excited about it. But I'll tell you, it feels like those are sometimes missed opportunities for us to kind of understand better where might we be looking for talent in different places, or we might need to do things to reopen application process just to make sure we have competition in terms of great applicants to continue to get them excited about these boards and commissions. So just a little bit of feedback.
Sure. Chair Gordon, Council Vice President Glidden, I would like to address your first comment. I will say that the city clerk's office gathers board staff every couple months just to talk about, things that are important to being a staff person for the board or commission, and training around unconscious bias and being more equitable as a staff person is something that that board staff are interested in and want. And for your second point, I think that's a very interesting idea and something that we can look into.
Yeah, it made me curious about CLIC, the diversity on CLIC, which is totally 100% solely 2 appointments per council office. And I'm sure we're not even thinking about it with what's the makeup of CLIC when we're going into that. And so it would be very interesting to find out what little diversity there is there. I could be wrong. Councilmember Fry also has a comment or question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with Councilmember Glidden. In the 3rd Ward, I think there are many spots that I think are highly competitive, whereas there's others where that I actually have to do a whole bunch of outreach just to get a single person to apply. So what that tells me is maybe we would lend to the overarching city goals in some areas, but in others, well, we're just kind of selecting people by default. So I think that makes a lot of sense.
Appreciate that. I do have a staff direction I wanted to make about this. And first of all, I want to say that I'm assuming that all the recommendations are things that the department is pursuing on their own, so that they're not included. And I have this written down if you want to take one and pass them down. One of them's for the next item. But this is something that caught my eye when it has specifically to do with age and 18 to 24-year-olds, which are called out. In fact, it says on page 7 of the plan, still falls short in the age category 18 to 24. And then if you look on page 8, you can see in 2014, it looked like maybe there was 1 person 18 to 24, and there's maybe 2 in 2016. And I know that there are some cities that explore with setting aside a seat. I think there's a lot of reasons why this might make sense. Partly also, I think an 18 to 24-year-old will be a way to maybe get at more renters, not necessarily, but it's also a way to get people involved civically when they're a little bit younger. The staff direction, I think I actually wrote it in such a way that it just says under 25, because I don't see why if a 17-year-old wanted a seat on a board, they shouldn't. And it's not the staff direction, I'll read it so you can be clear. It's just asking for some research to come back with some recommendations. So staff direction is directing neighborhood and community relations staff to work with the city clerk's office, the neighborhood and community engagement commission, and the 18 advisory boards and commissions surveyed as part of the 2016 diversity survey to develop recommendations for setting aside a seat on these boards and commissions for persons under 25. And maybe it's not going to be realistic on all of them. I don't know what the recommendations getting back we might have. I'll also note that this is a topic that came up. Committee members and a lot of people here know that we hosted a convening of the boards and commissions that report to this committee. We'll have a report on that in January. But one of the things that actually came up was some of the committees were saying we'd like to set, at least there was one, set aside a seat so we could have a youth representative because it would be so useful. And sometimes I think it's hard to do that unless we take some extraordinary measures. So I'm going to move that staff direction. See if there's any discussion on that. Seeing none, then all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, and then if there aren't any other comments, I just want to make sure Peggy set this up so that we can vote on receiving and filing this one first, and then we'll go on to 9.2. Yeah, let's approve receiving and filing this report. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. Okay, thank you very much. It's wonderful having you present to our committee. Now we'll move on to 9.2. This is a diversity report on the 2016 Neighborhood Board Diversity Survey. And Mr. Fine will be reporting to us on this. We haven't been doing this as long as we've been doing the boards and commissions. I think this might just be our second diversity survey for the neighborhood organization.
Yep. Can I get the PowerPoint?
Okay, well, yeah.
Here. Good. All right, good afternoon, Chair Gordon and committee members. My name is Araya Fine. I'm a neighborhood support specialist at the Neighborhood Community Relations Department. I'm presenting the results of the 2016 Neighborhood Board Diversity Survey Report, and this is a receive and file item. One note before we get started, page 13 of the report, the printed report, which you should have, as well. And submitted was corrected to remove skipped responses just to properly compare it to 2014 results. And so the updated report is the printed one you should have, and it's been corrected in the presentation. So today I'll be discussing just what we've learned from the results and how we intend to work toward our goals of becoming one Minneapolis, where disparities are eliminated so all Minneapolis residents can participate and prosper. So why we do the survey? We are, as you know, a city of incredible diversity, and we have this truly unique infrastructure with the neighborhood organizations that are across the city and provides an opportunity for, real thriving community engagement. And like any initiative of this scale, as hundreds of volunteers serving on neighborhood boards and committees, there are both stories of success, which you heard earlier for some of my colleagues about the great work that's being done, and then there's also areas for improvement. And so we're going to look at some of that today. As it notes here, neighborhood boards are responsible for decisions on how to allocate city funding, mainly through the community participation program is the funding we currently fund neighborhoods with, and they set neighborhood priorities. So it's important to us that neighborhoods ensure that the volunteers are reflective of the city demographics. Some of the key findings that we found from the result, 3 of the 7 diversity benchmarks, and these are similar to the appointed board and the commission's benchmarks, 3 of the 7 benchmarks were met. Between 2014 and 2016, there hasn't been a significant shift in demographics across the benchmarks. I'll break down some of those a little later. And we have work to do to increase representation in several areas. One thing you won't see in the report today, but is in the printed report, is the way that we broke down the survey responses by communities. And that gives a little bit more community level approach, which will make it so that we can do a little bit more intentional engagement with neighborhood organizations on how to improve on these benchmarks relative to the communities that they're serving in. Just a little mention of the scope of the work. So our department has 5 neighborhood support specialists, the role that I'm in, and we serve and support 70 neighborhoods. These are all independent, nonprofit neighborhood organizations, and so we work with them. They have 770 board members, and so obviously we aren't having direct communication with those 770. We're doing support roles to those neighborhood organizations themselves. They serve the 400,000 residents in Minneapolis and receive about $3 million in annual funding from the community participation program. Just to get started, the way we really tackled this year in the survey was trying to increase our response rate. We had 52% in 2014. This year, and this is thanks to the tireless work of my colleagues here, we went out in person to nearly 70 neighborhood organizations in the month of September, all those evening meetings. Many of you have probably attended, and we administered the surveys in person by paper and then followed up with online opportunity. And so we increased the response rate by 22% with a 74% response rate. We feel that gives us a bit of confidence in the results that we were able to get. So with the methodology, we use something similar to what the appointed boards and commissions does as far as the benchmark comparisons. We also use the Shannon Diversity Index in terms of age, income, and education. So the diversity measures are, again, similar to appointed boards and commissions. We tried to match up both the survey questions are identical so that we had a more accurate comparison to appointed boards and commissions, and are going to hopefully be able to continue that so it's comparative to previous years as well. So we focus on these 7 benchmarks. The one thing I did want to note in gender, it's not on the next slide because we don't have census data to compare it to, but in 2016 we added transgender and then an open-ended option to be more inclusive and move away from gender binary language. So, this is just the dashboard again, similar to what my colleague Cheyenne shared earlier. We used 80% and above as sort of a green indicator that is on target. 40 to 79% needs attention, and then below 39% needs improvement. So this is our diversity measure dashboard. You'll see we met 3 of the 7 benchmarks of age, gender, and income. We used the Shannon Diversity Index on age, income, and education. And then you'll see the yellow indicators are disability, education, and people of color. And then the red indicator needs attention is in the owner-renter category. I'm going to break down a couple of those a little bit more in these next slides here. Renter owner, so that's just who rents and who owns and is serving on neighborhood boards. We have 15.1% of survey respondents reported that they are renters, compared to 51% of renters across the city. You will note on this slide it doesn't total 100%. That's because some board members are at-large members. They might be business owners or property owners, students, or workers in that area that serve a unique role on those boards. So The next slide is about race and ethnicity. Again, this is comparing persons of color to white alone serving on these boards. People of color make up 39% of the city's population, and they are 17% of survey participants. So that identifies a gap in representation on neighborhood boards that we're hoping to work to correct. Last one, similar to appointed boards and commissions, we don't have census data or ACS data to compare this to, but we did ask questions around sexual identity. You can see from the report we had 11.8% of respondents identified as GLBQ, 0.4% as asexual, and 87.9% as heterosexual. And then the last thing I'll note is just in terms of length of service. So this is the amount of time that people that respond to the survey have served on neighborhood boards. You'll note that 66% have served less than 3 years, and of that 26% have served less than 1 year. That gives some indication of kind of board turnover and the potential for shifts over time of representation on these neighborhood boards. The recommendations, so as I just want to really emphasize, NCR would like to see more equitable representation at neighborhood boards throughout the city, and this requires a partnership and collaboration with these 70 neighborhood organizations. It's not something our department can do alone, but there's a lot of work that we can do to support these neighborhoods and the potential board members that might serve on those boards. So some of our recommendations summarized here are working really specifically on building on and establishing trainings, focus groups, and ongoing support both to the neighborhoods themselves and to potential new and existing board members of those organizations in an effort to kind of close the gap on this board representation. I want to emphasize this isn't about meeting a benchmark or a quota, but it's really about asking difficult questions about who feels prioritized by the neighborhoods, who feels welcome and has an opportunity to serve in this capacity. So this is work that we'll be doing, and we'll be working with the neighborhoods to better close these gaps. That's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that report. It's interesting. I'm glad that we're measuring this. I'll just alert my colleagues that on the sheet of paper that I passed out, there's also a staff direction about this item. Before we get to that, are there any questions anybody has? Nothing too shocking in the results here? Yeah, okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick comment. I don't know how this would be accomplished, but it might be interesting to consider interviewing folks who've been involved in neighborhood organizations in the past or who have come to one meeting and never come back or otherwise maybe aren't participating. Mm-hmm. Anecdotally, I hear from a lot of people in my ward, which is of course very young, very high renter population, has a lot of folks who are underrepresented citywide, concentrated in one place. So I hear a lot of stories about I tried to go to a meeting and I don't ever want to go back. And, I think there are a lot of reasons for that. It's not necessarily intentional, but anyway, just something to think about. The folks who are there, who we're talking to, are okay with how things are probably more than maybe people who aren't there.
Absolutely. Yeah, Chair Gordon and Councilmember Bender, just want to emphasize a couple of our recommendations that are right in line with that is for neighborhoods to share best practices. So to really talk about those kind of issues and how they can be, learn from one another to emphasize that. And then also we plan on doing some focus groups, both with board members who are part of those underrepresented groups to say, hey, what made you overcome some of those barriers to actually choose to serve on a board, as well as all the board members to get a better sense of, sort of what the value add is for them to participate in some of this work. So yeah, great point.
I appreciate that too. And I noted before this started that this is the second time we've done this survey. And I think the second time we looked at the survey from our boards and commissions, we had made very little progress as well. We also, though, started something called the One Minneapolis Fund, where we were actually funding people to develop leadership in the community and bring in more diversity. And we've seen some shift in our own boards and commissions. So I think just tracking this information, getting the neighborhoods more aware of it. I also have to really appreciate that staff went to all the neighborhood organizations and helped them do the survey. So I think that was significant, and that not only in getting survey results, but for getting the boards to go, oh, the city must really care about this. Let's think about who we are and what we're doing. And I know many of them are, and they're working really hard. And so part of it isn't saying you're a bunch of failures. Never mind. I think what we want to say is, okay, let's see what we can do to help. And this This idea partly came up from a discussion we had when we were talking about measuring the One Minneapolis Fund. We had a report a couple, maybe it was just one committee meeting ago. I know there were a lot of questions about what are the metrics, what are we actually getting for this? And then when I was getting briefed about this, I discussed this a little bit with the Director Rubidor. I think about, well, could we maybe use some One Minneapolis funds to target it better to help our neighborhood organizations? So I developed this staff direction, and I'm now going to read it for you. Directing neighborhood and community relations staff to work with the Neighborhood and Community Engagement Commission to recommend a way to dedicate at least a portion of future One Minneapolis funding to fund organizations that will work with and support neighborhood organizations to increase the number of potential neighborhood organization board members who are renters and people of color. My hope is with kind of a targeted effort, a supportive effort, that we'll find some groups that are really excited about this and can help with this recruitment. Now, once they're recruited, they have to get elected to serve on the board, and once they serve and go to a few meetings, they have to want to stay on there. So it's a longer process, but this hopefully was a piece that will help with that. Are there any questions about that or comments? Councilmember Fry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have any amendments, but I just want to make sure and perhaps just ask the question is what specifically is going to be done by some of these organizations to ensure that the neighborhood boards and other commissions are increasing their membership for people of color? Because, I can see what I don't want to happen is a scenario where there's a whole lot of consultation and a bunch of meetings and then nothing really changes. I mean, I would prefer to just pay somebody to door knock. As an example.
Council Chair Gordon and Councilmember Fry. Within our recommendations, we do, and not only within our recommendations, but our role really is to work day to day with these neighborhood organizations to support them making progress on this effort. The city funding that we do provide is really specifically about community participation. It's a community participation program. It's about, and in those guidelines is about reaching out to underrepresented communities. So there is a bit of precedent to use the funding from the city to do that outreach and engagement necessary to close some of these gaps. And so, I mean, again, our role is, these are independent organizations, but our role really is to support them in making that progress.
So I'm not arguing that the intentions are good, and the conclusion we want to get to is valid and is necessary. My question is, how are we, I guess, as the city, how are we being specific so that the funds are being spent for outreach and engagement? I mean, at some points, people are going to have to do the grunt work, which is knocking on doors and, holding meetings in communities of color to make sure that they understand what some of the, and I'm really specifically thinking about neighborhood associations right now, and I realize we're not limited to neighborhood associations in this endeavor. But, what specifically are we going to be asking them to do in this with the One Minneapolis Fund money?
So are you asking specifically related to the staff direction?
I am, yes. So maybe it's a better question for you, Mr. Chair.
Right. So
I apologize.
First of all, the staff direction is asking for more specific recommendations to come back, but the staff direction is also more of the incentives or carrot approach. So it's not, and so I would say giving some support and some resources, saying we're going to dedicate some funds. We're already dedicating to One Minneapolis Fund to develop diverse leadership in the city for renters and people of color on neighborhood boards is a step to take. It's a step short of saying you're going to lose city funding somehow if you don't diversify your board. I mean, it's not the stick approach, and so it's not necessarily a guarantee. I'll admit that. What this is saying is we're going to put some resources into this and see if we can't move the dial by doing that. So I think it's a different discussion if we were going to.
And my question.
There's no guarantee.
Sure. Yeah, I know. I understand that. And I know you can never guarantee it, but if there's a little bit more specificity that's attached to either the staff direction or their plan when they come back, I would be much more amenable to.
I think there'll have to be specificity, and my intention would be there'd be a request for proposal then that would be drafted for the future funding of the One Minneapolis Fund, and in that request for proposal, there'll be goals that are specifically mentioned that will include recruitment of renters and people of color to serve on neighborhood boards, or maybe recruitment's the wrong word. So there will be more specificity in terms of what are the contracts that are going to go out. There already has been more specificity in one Minneapolis funding. Maybe Mr. Rubidor or somebody wants to weigh in on that.
Chair Gordon and council members, if I could try to answer your question.
Yeah, that'd be great.
One, I think we can come back with a lot more specifics around this per the staff direction. So what I would ask is that you would give us a little bit of time to work with the NCEC. The first thing that comes to mind when this notion was brought to me was very early in the process of One Minneapolis. White House received a grant from us, and one of the things that they did, which to Councilmember Bender's point, is they met with a number of people that were from the Latino community, specifically around neighborhood organizations. Just what do they think they are? What is their knowledge of them? Have they had any experience with them? In order to collect just data, basically, to understand what it takes for that particular community to engage with neighborhood groups. And we got that report back from White House, and actually they presented to the NCEC. But I think what we could do with the One Minneapolis Fund, if I understand Chair Gordon's intent, is really have some funds dedicated to have a specific report back that leads to changes into the program that lead to those results. What I really like about the notion is this is a community-based approach that we use community partners in order to do this, because this is all about relationship building. So using the core of the One Minneapolis program is around using partnerships with people in the community that are already doing this work, but really making sure that that focuses. So long story short is, if I understand the staff direction correctly, we can come back in probably a couple months to give you an idea of what those specifics would be. The One Minneapolis Fund, the next round of funding, the NCEC will be taking up those guidelines in January and February with revisions to those, which would then, this could be included in that and then incorporated for the 2017 grant fund. So,
okay, and so how does this staff direction change the route we're already on with respect to the One Minneapolis Fund? I mean, the One Minneapolis Fund already has goals to increase participation in communities of color in these organizations and entities.
Well, from my thinking is this says we're going to carve out a piece of that funding and focus it like a laser in on recruiting and getting people of color and renters on neighborhood organizations. So right now, I think the goals are more general. It's diversifying our boards, commissions, and our neighborhood organizations, and they look at that. So that's my intention, is we put some real focused effort in.
Chair Gordon, if I may also just add to that, by being real specific about that we're looking for outcomes around neighborhood organizations, it will also then make clear to the applicants. It will attract applicants that are working in that particular area as well.
Yeah, I think sometimes One Minneapolis funds, they haven't talked to neighborhood organizations at all necessarily. They went out and did great work and did trainings and outreach, but this works.
Okay.
Okay. Seeing no questions, I will move the staff direction. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. And then I will move to receive and file the 2016 Neighborhood Board Diversity Survey Report. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
Thank you.
Here's two. And now we're up to our last item, and I think that Mr. Milburn gets the award. I think he showed up early for the committee meeting, and he was the last item. So this is on our community solar garden subscription agreement. We went out for an RFP, and I believe we got response. And I just want to congratulate you on making it through the meeting so far, sir. Hope it's been interesting.
Council Chair
Welcome.
Gordon and council member, committee members. My name is Brian Milberg. I'm the energy manager for the city of Minneapolis. I'm here to report on our community solar garden, where we went out with a city-sponsored RFP. But before I do that, I'd like to say today is a very special day. I hope you noticed it was a little bit brighter when you came in here today. I think it's appropriate that this committee is the first meeting in our newly lit council chamber. These are all LED lights. We have 50% more light for the cameras with less energy than we had before. And we are at this date now embarking on replacing all of our fluorescent lighting in the city with LEDs. We just started our project. So I wanted to let you know that.
Thank you. Fantastic.
Back to our community solar gardens. So basically, we were here once before. We did a very large community solar garden project in a consortium with Metropolitan Council. This was an action that came out of that effort where we went out with an RFP, which I'll discuss in a moment. But we're going to just do a real quick review on how the gardens work, the proposals that we received, the financial structures, and we're going to make a recommendation to the committee. I do want to say that we did something here that no one else has done in the state of Minnesota. There are over 900 gardens that have already applied to Excel Energy, and not a single one of them has tried to do what we tried to do in this RFP. So it was definitely worth doing. Just to reiterate how the gardens work, on the left-hand side of the triangle, you see the solar garden in the lower left-hand corner. They basically provide solar electricity to Excel Energy for free. Excel Energy sells all of our electricity to us as a customer, just like they always have, and they bill us exactly as they always have. Except that for the amount that we subscribe from the garden, we get a credit, which is noted by that green arrow of cash coming back to the city as a credit on every kilowatt hour we subscribe to. And in addition, we pay the garden operator on the bottom in the red arrow, we pay them for the electricity. What we'll be discussing here today is the price for that electricity that we pay to the garden. So typically, if this was an example monthly bill at one of our water treatment buildings, over $18,000 of regular electricity, we would get a credit of we would get a credit based on the $14,000 after the subscription payments, and we would make this extra $4,000 subscription payment. The net result is we save about $700 or almost 4% on our electricity bill. So in our proposal, we asked for gardens up to 1 megawatt in size, which is what the law is the maximum that's allowed. And the difference that we did in our RFP is we asked for the renewable energy credits to be accruing to the city. All of the other 900 applications have the renewable energy credits going to Excel Energy, which they then use to meet their renewable portfolio standards. In our garden, the RECs would stay with the city, and Excel Energy would have to then find other ways to meet their portfolio standards. We also asked for a price with the RECs going to Excel, as most other gardens, to try and see what the market was saying, what that price differential would be. And in a change from the last set of RFPs we engaged in this one we specifically called out the typical city construction civil rights goals of women and minority business enterprises in the RFP. We received 2 responses, one from SunEdison and the other from Solar Power and Light. These are both national organizations, but both of them would use local workforce to build the array and to manage them. A little color here just so you can, when we get to a future graph, you can see how it works. But SunEdison gave us 2 proposals. Both, in their case, both proposals showed the RECs going to Excel Energy. One proposal was they would just give us a discount from this credit that we would get each year. The credit is going to change each year with a PUC filing. And so basically, there's no risk in this type of a contract. If the credit is 12 cents a kilowatt hour, they're going to charge us 0.75 cents less than that, so we will make a little bit of money each month. The other option is to go with a standard price of $11.95, which right now is slightly above the credit, but it would increase at 1.5% per year in terms of our subscription price. But the credit from Excel is expected to go up at least 2.5% a year. So over time, we would actually start making money. And if rates increase as they have over the last 10 to 15 years, we actually could accrue between $100,000 and $300,000 in net profit, net present value with that type of a contract. The other company was Solar Power and Light, and they did provide a price with both RECs going to the city or to Excel. Now, their pricing was much higher, and it's significantly higher than anything we received in this RFP as well as in the previous set of RFPs. And basically, no matter how I ran the numbers, their price goes up at 2.5% a year, and it's already 2 to 3 cents higher than what we're paying for electricity. So there's really no way to make this contract financially viable. If we chose to do it, we would, over time, lose hundreds of thousands of dollars over the 25-year period of the contract. So as I said before, how much we could save or might lose really depends on how fast electricity rates increase. And this just shows a chart from various estimates. The Department of Commerce uses 2.65. I went and did an analysis of our larger accounts, and over 8 years, they went up 3.7%. However, just in the last 2 years, they've gone up 7.5%. So it's hard to predict the future. This slide is a little busy, and that's because the first set of bars on that legend are all of the arrays that we subscribed to in the previous RFP. And you'll see that over 25 years, they're all positive. If you look now at the last 4 items, the dark blue is the Sun Edison with the accelerator, and it's about $110,000 in net present value. The no risk option shows a net present value of about $78,000. But then the Solar Power and Light, that's the light blue and the gray, you'll see that they're significantly negative, and they never turn in the positive direction. Now, this is with the Department of Commerce's 2.65% escalator in electricity rates. There is, of course, unfortunately, the possibility that electricity rates might not go up as much in the future. And if that is true, you can see that, again, the no risk option, which is the darker blue, stays positive. But because of the escalators in the subscription price, the others do turn negative over time. And of course, the Solar Power and Light is significantly negative. There is the possibility that rates will go up even higher. And here I show again, the Sun Edison numbers are always positive. And even at this large increase of 3.7%, the Solar Power and Light still stays negative. Now, just to see if you're awake, we'll have a nice colored chart. And this basically just matches up with what was on the graph. It just shows you numbers. And what I'm showing here is that if the council wishes to take no risk at all, then we should go with the very first bar on the chart, Sun Edison with the fixed discount. It's a known savings every year of around $4,000. If we want to bet on electricity rates continuing at their current clip, then I would go with the escalator, where we could save between $100,000 and $300,000. And as you can see in this chart, all the solar and power light, no matter what types of assumptions we use, they're all negative. So the Property Services Department and Finance are proposing that we do not go with a Solar Power and Light contract, but that we do contract with Sun Edison at whichever of those 2 rates you so decide.
Well, thank you very much. Are there any comments or questions? Councilmember Glidden.
So thank you, Mr. Chair. And maybe you had some thoughts you're going to share with us. I just thought it was kind of interesting. You present the 2 scenarios, but didn't give us a staff recommendation on one versus the other. And so that's where I think kind of, there doesn't seem like there's tremendous risk, but there is some risk. And so, just having some input from you as someone who has been following kind of what might be in the future, as much as you're able to give us your thoughts from kind of, again, a city perspective of what might be our best choice here.
Go ahead. I think you were trying to, I think your recommendation is to go with the no risk option, but it's a little unclear.
Chair Gordon, Councilmember Glidden, other members of the committee, Personally, the 1.5% escalator falls directly in the middle of the previous contracts we approved. I don't see anything that's changed in the meantime.
Mhm.
I personally, if it was my personal choice, I would go with the escalator.
Mhm.
But
Because of the length of the contract and
because of the length of the contract.
So is that what's recommended on the RCA?
Pardon?
That's what you're recommending on the RCA?
Well, we left it up to the committee.
yeah. Thank you for clarifying that. That's why I wanted to
Yep.
make
No,
sure
I
I was
left it up to you. but
getting all the benefit
either-
though of your
I would
insight,
go with
and
the
then we get
escalator,
some
yes.
choice here. Okay.
Okay, so that wasn't necessarily clear to me. You have an opinion?
Well, I mean, I guess I would say if Mr. Milberg feels comfortable that the 1.5 let me just see his percent option is risk that is not significant risk to the city, then especially due to the length of the contract and how that lined up with other options that were kind of already before us, I think that seems like a reasonable way to go. So I would go ahead and make that motion if that helps move us forward with discussion.
Excellent. Are there any questions or comments on the motion now that we've figured out which one you were recommending? Or maybe you weren't really recommending either, I understand.
Well, Chair Gordon and committee, I would like to add one last item that I forgot to mention. If we accept this contract with all of the arrays that we have of our own, as well as the subscriptions that we've agreed to implement over 2017 previously, we'll have almost 10% of our electricity will somehow be tied to renewable energy, totally separate from a portfolio standard at Excel. So I just wanted to mention that.
I don't see any discussion on your motion beyond that either. So why don't we vote on that? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. And I do have one quick staff direction because we've talked about going out for a third RFP. Remember, we've had this discussion before. Essentially, this is a request for proposals to go out for another solar garden where we could make subscriptions available to people of low or moderate incomes. And this is where there be different ways to do it. We're going to see what possible providers, what input they would give. And this would be also prioritize having something that's available to Minneapolis residents, hopefully located in the city of Minneapolis. And I think the big piece is now that the PUC's kind of weighed in on the low and moderate income piece and the utilities have, now let's go out for an RFP and see what we could actually get. So I didn't read the staff direction and I passed out all my copies, but I think shall I read it? Okay. Directing Finance and Property Services staff to report back to the HEC committee by March 31st with a community solar request for proposals incorporating the following criteria for evaluation: availability of subscriptions for Minneapolis residents and businesses, service by at least a certain minimum percentage of the overall community solar garden to low and moderate income customers, and potentially incentives for low and moderate income customers, with the city of Minneapolis acting as the backup subscriber to facilitate service to these customers. The third bullet point, location within the city of Minneapolis, potentially on a city-owned site. And the fourth, potential ownership of the garden by Minneapolis residents, businesses, and property owners. Seeing no questions on that, all those in favor of that staff direction, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries. And I think that concludes our business today. Yes. Okay, one more item.
I guess with the quick transition from our department presentations, there was the side-by-side comparison, and I don't want to break protocol. If it's possible that I could present that for a quick minute of your time, council members and staff. If that's breaking protocol, I'll just say happy holidays and all the best.
How about you share, so it's just one slide?
It's two.
It's two pictures. Would committee members prefer to get that over email, or can we take 2 minutes?
Whichever you prefer.
It's a mixed bag. Oh, he's got, there was a piece of the presentation that got missed. We were going to look at the two diversity surveys and compare them. He's got 2 slides. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you.
Oh, email's great, is what you said? Your mic's
great. Email's fantastic.
Oh, okay.
That's fine. So that's fine. So happy holidays and goodwill to you all and your families as well. I'm ready. That's fine.